All right, so the next step is understanding how to set up your campaigns, right? So we've set up most all of the account. We have a test agent. We've set up the call outcomes feedback loop, right? So we know to not call people back if they shouldn't be called back. We know all that. Now we need to understand how to actually implement this. How do we actually set up a calling campaign for whoever we're trying to call, right? So one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people go wrong with is they'll say, okay, we'll set up a single webhook when a lead comes in and we'll call them one time, right? But the reality is, very few people are going to pick up on that first call. So what needs to happen is you need to set up a flow of multiple calls over a certain duration of time to call these people back, right? And you guys can look at your own legal parameters and preferences to make sure that you set up the flow properly. But ultimately, the way it'll look is something like this, right? We're going to create something that's entering them into a workflow. So let's just say they submitted a form. Let's just say it's a Facebook form, right? So they submit a Facebook form, and we want to make sure, obviously, that we only call them between certain hours. So maybe I only want to call Monday and Friday between 9 a.m. and let's just say 6 p.m. Right? And we'll save that and we'll put a 1 minute wait. So the second they fill out that form, it's going to wait 1 minute. And then what it's going to do is it's going to tag. So this is how we trigger off calls, is with tags. So let's just say that is, I don't know, CT lead setter. Right? Let's say this is the tag that we want to use. So typically I always try to keep this organized and tag things properly. And I'll even say call one, just so I know how many times I've called. Right? So this very first tag is going to be the very first call, right? Assuming we set up the campaign side correctly, which I'll show you on the next video. But that'll be tag number one. Then we want some kind of wait in between this, right? We don't want to call it back to back right away. We want to have some kind of delay. So maybe let's say that's 1 hour. Let's just say 2 hours. Right? Again, we want to make sure that we're only calling at the allowed times. And we're going to go right here. Let's again go to 6:30. That way I make sure this only pushes through in between 9 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Right? Again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So what you can do to make your life a lot easier also is you can start to copy this. Right? You don't need to keep setting that every time. So now I can go here. I can even copy all actions if I wanted to, right? So I'll copy these next two steps. So the only thing I'd want to come in here and change is this to save that. And then I can put 2 hours. I always name these. Really helps to understand what's going on just from a glance when you come in at a later point. All right, so now everything's named. What you want to make sure of is obviously that you're not bombarding people, right? You don't want to call them a million times a day. So usually I would think 2, your first day is probably a good amount of calls. And then what you can do is make sure that you wait until the next day. Right, so we can put a wait. We could put, maybe let's just do an 8-hour wait. Right. And again, you guys can just copy this, but I'm just doing it the difficult way. Just like that. So now I've created an 8-hour wait, and the reality is there's only a 9.5-hour window of available calling. So logically speaking, I have 12 total hours of wait time, right? So 8, 10, 12. So that means there's no possible way I can trigger off this third call before that 8-hour window or whatever the 9-hour window was. Right, so I'm just running through this quickly, but I want you to understand the concept of it. And then always recommend periodically saving. That way, if your computer crashes or something happens, you don't lose all the progress you've made. Right? So you can kind of see this tag going all the way down. And you can continue this, right? A lot of my workflows, I have 20 something calls. This will go all the way to 20 something. The frequency of the calls diminishes as we go on. I'm not going to call people 3 times a day after, 7 days. Maybe I'll call them 1 time every other day. And the goal is that, a lot of people, maybe they don't pick up their phone the first time, the second time, the third time, fourth time, fifth time, so on. We're going to call them enough so that we get them to pick up the phone. And what that feedback loop, that inbound webhook that I'd shown you guys on the last step, what that does is it makes sure that as we're going through here, right, as we're calling through here, we're not calling people that have already booked an appointment, said do not call, wrong number, disqualified, any of that, right? You guys are able to set that up accordingly. So hopefully this makes sense for this first part, how to set up these workflows. The next video I'm going to cover with you guys is how to create the campaigns in the ClearTalk software.